the meeting to order, please. This is the Village of Riverside Board of Trustees regular meeting for Thursday, December 5th, 2019. The time is 7:01. Please call the roll.
President Sells.
Here.
Trustee Gallegos.
Here.
Trustee Giza.
Here.
Trustee Hammond.
Here.
Trustee Evans.
Here.
Trustee Pollock.
Here.
Village Manager Francis.
Here.
Village Attorney Mars.
Here.
Also present Village Clerk Haley and Trustee Peters will be joining us shortly.
Would you please join us for the pledge?
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and welcome to everyone who's here with us this evening and those of you watching at home. If you are here and you'd like to address the board at any time, I just ask that you be recognized by the president, that you make your comments from the podium so that the folks at home can hear and see what you have to say. Up first is public comment. Would anyone like to address the board at this point? Please.
Joan Wyaduck, 165 Bartram Road, and I am president of the library board. So I'm here tonight to thank the board for recognizing our plans and to propose, which will be on tonight's meeting, for you to have us pass a referendum for the Riverside Library, which in the amount of $1.5 million. And the information was given to the board previously. So we want to, I believe, to thank you in advance for helping us to get this referendum on the ballot. It'll be up to the residents, of course, of Riverside to decide whether they want to pass it or not. We will be giving much information to everyone in the village. We will, not only in publicity, but also through our own efforts at the library, having meetings, having open forums, so that we want to really present our plans, and so that everybody would be very understanding of what we're proposing to do. So at this time, I would just like to thank the board for recognizing this, and hopefully tonight this will pass. Thank you.
I like your sweater. Anyone else? Next up are reports of village officers. I have a sad duty to do this evening. I'd like to read a note that was posted online today from our friends over at Riverside Foods. The Riverside Foods family experienced the loss of our founder, Anthony Garbus, yesterday. More than the original owner who brought Riverside Foods to Riverside back in 1984, he was a beloved father, grandfather, friend, brother, and most recently, great-grandfather. We are so happy that he passed in peace and left a beautiful legacy. For those who didn't know Tony as well, he immigrated from Greece in 1958 and was a shining example of the American dream. With some small loans, he was able to acquire a small food market on the corner of Central Avenue and Lake Street. After a couple of small markets in the Berwyn and Oak Park areas, he heard that the Jewel in Riverside was about to shut down. And when he got to know Riverside, he said, "I would love to serve this community." He then took over ownership and started a community institution that still stands today. That's the type of classy guy that he was. I have had the good fortune to shop at Riverside Foods for many years. When I first started shopping there, Tony was actually handling the day-to-day operations of it. And as the years went by, he slowly kind of stepped back and other family members would take over. But every now and then, even in the later years, I would go in, and then sometimes Tony would be there. And it seems like I always met him coming out of the back where the butcher worked in the back. And he was a remarkable man, because every single time I saw him, he never made you feel like a customer. He always made you feel like you were his friend. And that still lives on today when you go into that store. And he did a lot for this town. All of us have a great deal of thanks and appreciation to send to him. Condolences to his family, and rest in peace, Tony. You'll be missed. Thank you. Manager.
I do not have a report this evening.
We'll move on then to the approval of the consent agenda, and I apologize in advance because it's lengthy, and I have to read it because of Mr. Mars makes me to. On the approval of the consent agenda this evening, approve the voucher list of bills December 5th, approve the Village Board of Trustees regular meeting minutes of November 21st, review and file the following: the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners meeting minutes of November 11th, the Historical Commission meeting minutes of October 21st, and the Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting and public hearing meeting minutes of September 25th. Approve the tax levy ordinance for the year 2019 for a 2020 collection for the Village of Riverside, Cook County, State of Illinois. Approve the tax levy ordinance for the year 2019-2020 collection for the Riverside Public Library, Village of Riverside, County of Cook, State of Illinois. An ordinance adopting the annual budget for the Village of Riverside for the year commencing January 1, 2020 and ending December 31, 2020 for the Village of Riverside. An ordinance adopting the annual budget for the Riverside Public Library for the year commencing January 1, 2020 and ending December 31, 2020. A resolution directing the reduction of the 2019 property tax levies by the Cook County Tax Extension Office if necessary. An ordinance abating the tax hereto levied for the year 2019 to pay the principal and interest on the $2.25 million general obligation refunding bonds, alternate revenue source, Series 2010A of the Village of Riverside. An ordinance abating the tax hereto levied for the year 2019 to pay the principal and interest on $2,175,000 general obligation refunding bonds, alternative revenue source, Series 2011 of the Village of Riverside. A resolution authorizing the village manager to execute a supplemental state of work contract with Municipal GIS Partners, Inc. for a not to exceed amount of $41,901 for the 2020 Geographic Information System services. A resolution waiving competitive bidding and authorizing the village manager to enter into various purchase orders. A resolution authorizing the village manager to create a purchase order in the amount of $38,490 for the purchase of rock salt from Cargill Incorporated for 2019-2020 snow and ice control. A motion to approve WSSRA board member designate and alternate on behalf of the Village of Riverside Board of Trustee, that being Ron Malchiotti and Karen Johns. And lastly, a resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement by and between the Village of Brookfield, the Village of LaGrange Park, the Village of Lyons, the Village of Riverside, Illinois, and the Cook County Forest Preserve District for the Des Plaines River South Extension. Does anyone need any of these removed for discussion? Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion second to approve.
So moved.
By Mr. Gallegos. Second by
Second.
Ms. Evans. Please call the roll.
Trustee Gallegos.
Aye.
Trustee Giza.
Aye.
Trustee Hannan.
Aye.
Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next up are departments, commissions, and trustee liaisons. Are there any liaison reports? I've asked Trustee Gallegos if he'll give us a short comment about the upcoming holiday stroll. Trustee.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. President. Tomorrow will be our annual holiday stroll. It is a unique night here in Riverside. The 45th annual Chamber of Commerce will have it starting at 5:30, where the RB Magical will be singing at Museum Campus, and at 5:45 Santa will arrive to light up the tree. Thereafter, he will be at Riverside Bank, where he will be there for photo opportunities. And then we'll have pony rides throughout the town on Quincy Street and at the Riverside Garage. Rick Gallery has the train already set up as a annual treat that we're all very fortunate to have. There'll be live entertainment upstairs. There'll be some stuff going on stage here at Township Hall. Live entertainment at Riverside First American Bank. I think Molly's will also have live entertainment there too. There will be a van that goes out on the east part of Burlington to go out to see Santa Claus at Comic Collector. We're looking at like 40 degrees tomorrow, which will be a beautiful evening. So I, of course, invite everyone to come out and enjoy this wonderful treat. Thank you.
And Jill and I are attending bar at the train station from 6 to 7. So stop by.
All right.
Anything else? Okay. We'll move on then to ordinances and resolutions. First up, it's a consideration and action on an ordinance providing for and requiring the submission of a proposition of issuing not to exceed $1.5 million general obligation library bonds to the voters of the Village of Riverside, Cook County, Illinois, at the general primary election to be held on the 17th day of March 2020. Attorney Mars, did you want to say something about this?
Sure, yeah. As the board will recall, the library came back in September and made a presentation to the board about their plans for the renovation, their efforts at fundraising, and their need for bond issuance. The board that time indicated some preliminary support for the idea, at which time the library began working with Spear and Chapman and Cutler, the village's bond counsel, on putting together the necessary materials to move this forward. The library has had extensive discussions, and at their November 12th meeting, they unanimously approved a resolution approving a plan and estimate of cost, determining the financing that they need, and forwarding this request to you to put this proposition on the ballot. Because the library is a local library as opposed to an independent library district, the village is the conduit through which these bonds would be issued. There's a provision that was identified in state law that will allow these bonds, if issued, to not count. If they're issued by next November, they won't count against the village's debt limit. And so as a first step, the library is asking you to approve this resolution so the question can be submitted to the county for placement on the March election, the March 17th election.
So we need a motion to approve this, is that right?
Hold on a second. So just so everyone at home can hear what you're going to be seeing on that ballot, the referendum question will read, shall the Village of Riverside, Cook County, Illinois renovate the interior of the lower level of the Riverside Public Library building and furnish necessary equipment in connection therewith and issue its bonds to the amount of $1,500,000 for the purpose of paying the cost thereof. So that's what will be on the ballot should this pass. So I would ask for a motion and a second to approve the ordinance.
So moved.
By Mr. Gallegos,
Second.
by Mr. Hannan. Any further comment? Please call the roll.
Trustee Gallegos.
Aye.
Trustee Chiesa.
Aye.
Trustee Hannan.
Aye.
Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Pollak.
Aye.
Motion carries. Best of luck.
Yeah.
We have no further ordinances or resolutions. We'll move on now to the considerations. We have before us tonight a discussion of a very, very preliminary discussion of a Harlem Avenue Railroad grade crossing feasibility study. Director Francis.
I just wanted to give a brief introduction. Tom Murtha from CMAP is here to provide additional background and answer any questions that the board may have. CMAP is engaging a consultant to complete a feasibility study of up to 5 grade crossings in the Chicago area. Harlem Avenue is noted currently as one of those 5. However, in order for CMAP to proceed with it, they need concurrence to incorporate the Harlem Avenue crossing based on the communities that would be impacted or involved with that public feedback. Currently, Berwyn has concurred with the feasibility study and also the IDOT, which is the Illinois Department of Transportation. So CMAP would like to receive some feedback and to inquire as to whether or not there is concurrence by the Village of Riverside for them to facilitate the study and for us to be part of that discussion. This in no way obligates the village financially. It's just facilitating and reviewing that crossing, the potential pedestrian options and or grade crossings, whether or not anything can be done. So I will introduce Tom Murtha from CMAP, and then he will provide some additional feedback, and then if the board has any questions, he'll be able to answer them.
So, thank you very much. We are engaging a consultant, Jacobs Engineering, to conduct a very early feasibility study that will provide us two products. One is purpose and need for the project with community input as far as what the issues are, what the community hopes to achieve with the project, and then a set of screened alternatives that, again, based on the community's identified purposes and needs, addresses those purposes and needs, and also provides information with regard to things like cost estimates and that sort of thing. The sort of improvements that we would be looking at would include, again, based on the purpose and need, everything from traffic flow improvements on the affected roads and adjacent roads to improvements to nearby crossings. Again, Berwyn has expressed interest in not only looking at Harlem Avenue, but also the crossings as far east as East Avenue. So there are issues with police coverage and that sort of thing, fire coverage that need to be addressed. So the sorts of improvements, traffic flow improvements, raising the grade of the road, lowering the grade of the road, raising the grade of the railroad, lowering the grade of the railroad. Again, all of these sorts of things, and also not only accommodating highway traffic, but also pedestrian traffic. We note that this had been looked at in two previous studies, neither of which I was familiar with when I started this project. But it was looked at as part of what we call a strategic regional Ontario project in the late 1990s, and also there was a study in the 1940s of raising the BNSF over a span from East Avenue all the way to Downers Grove. So this particular crossing is identified in our region's CREATE program as an area with both a high number of vehicles, tens of thousands of vehicles per day, but also more than 100 trains per day. So it does cause a lot of disruption, not only for the typical train movements, but also when a train breaks down, when there's an incident. Again, the concept is to look to see whether there are mitigating strategies or projects that we can engage in to address those. The feasibility study would be the first phase of a number of projects to get to a plan that we can let to construction companies. Again, first a feasibility study, then a phase one engineering process that might last several years. Following that, the preparation of plans, specifications, and cost estimates, and then finally a construction project. So we're looking at a process that may take a decade, even if we move fast on this. So again, we are looking for concurrence. We will not move forward with the project without the Village of Riverside's concurrence. We may, however, if the Village of Riverside doesn't concur, we may simply look at East Avenue in Berwyn, again, based on their identified issues and again, wanting to provide some access to this. Lots of people have to wait for these trains in this area. I had to wait for my child to be born, going to McNeil Hospital. That was something. So, and I'm sure most people in this community have stories like that. So, again, thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Murtha, for coming tonight. I appreciate you being here. Trustees, do you have any questions about this? Mr. Powell?
Yes. To what extent will this particular study look at aspects such as complete streets or transit-oriented development or train station improvements or is it just simply a traffic engineering type of study?
So that's, to some extent that will be defined by what the community wants. So IDOT has a complete streets policy right now that basically requires that any highway improvement include full pedestrian and bicycle access. So the study that was done in the 1990s eventually came up with a design that was unacceptable to the community, and that was what the public input said. They didn't move forward with it, but again, we couldn't build what was proposed at that time.
Other questions?
Well, can you give me examples of what type of safety considerations would be made for it? Just
So everything from sight distance to pedestrian crossings, signal operations, making sure that freight is also accommodated in anything so that there are lots of trucks moving on Harlem Avenue, and keeping those separated from pedestrian movements as much as possible. The station safety would also be an issue. Ease of people, getting to businesses, access safety. So the thing is that this is a build-out community. There are lots of uses, lots of existing issues that the engineers need to look at. Now, some of those may be, kind of put off to a more detailed study, because eventually you'll get down to the nearest couple inches with regard to how everything is designed. That won't be where we get to with this study. It will be more general, but again, the basic concepts are going to be identified in this study for further, kind of sifting and winnowing with regard to the improvements as we move on.
Mr. Paul, Mr. Andrew, go first.
Go ahead, Trustee Powell.
Well, I just was going to follow up. I certainly support this effort and moving forward with it, and I would encourage the village and CMAP to look at transit-oriented development, look at a broader picture than just simply how traffic moves through there, because I think this intersection with the train station is an opportunity, could be an opportunity for both Berwyn and Riverside.
Mr. Hannon?
Several questions. You mentioned a 1990 study that had a proposal that was not accepted. Could you, if you know, what was that specific proposal?
So the proposals that were eventually put into that study didn't include any pedestrian accommodation whatsoever. So it was simply, if I recall, like lowering the roadway and then leaving pedestrians to cross at grade. Again, it was, as was feared, simply a traffic moving project, and it's something that we as CMAP wouldn't find acceptable, and no community would find acceptable at this time. So.
And then as far as the process, you mentioned in your letter, which was very helpful, that moving forward at this stage has no financial
Right.
ask from the village. But if you could walk me through the process on when the village becomes financially obligated, and when we get to say yes or no, or proceed or not proceed.
So this would primarily be a project that would be the responsibility of the jurisdiction agencies for the roadways. That would primarily be IDOT. Would be if we say did a grade change for Harlem Avenue, that would be the responsibility of IDOT. If there were an optimum solution that changed the grade of the railroad, that would be the responsibility of Metra and or the BNSF, together with the BNSF. But with those financial, kind of central people obligated to push the project forward, there may be improvements such as sewer and water or that sort of thing that go along with the project that may be worthwhile to do based on the fact that the area is being dug up, it may be more efficient for the village to engage in those projects at this time. And if there were sort of these add-on things, then those obligations would be determined as probably not at this time, but toward the end of the phase one process, when there was coordination between the jurisdiction agency and the village of Riverside. So there is often a match for some pedestrian improvements as part of the projects that are built, but not on structure. So there's a whole policy that IDOT has with regard to the requirements of match and so forth. So those would be worked out during the phase one process. But again, we don't even know. We don't even know at this point what a solution is going to look like. So this is all very speculative. But again, those decisions would probably be in the range of 4 to 5 years away.
So as I understand it, you would do this feasibility study, and then is the next stage to propose a specific plan, and then we can decide if we move forward or not move forward?
Yeah.
And then what if we decide not to move forward, or, between the three people that have to agree, if they don't agree, what happens then?
Well, so typically if we don't agree, then the project usually doesn't move forward at all. So IDOT is and the railroads are typically loath to move forward with these projects without community support. Remember that the transportation dollars are scarce. So there's if a project isn't wanted in one community, there are others lined up to move forward with it. So we don't put the money where it's not wanted.
Great. It's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
No, I think we should be involved with this, of course, at the discussion part, but
So I have a few questions, just trying to conceptualize what the various alternatives could possibly be. And I know that you're just asking to take a preliminary look. But when you say grade separation, you're either talking about taking the cars underneath the train, taking the cars over the train, or taking the train over the cars. Is that basically right?
Taking the train over the cars. You could also take the train under the cars, although that would be a problem in Berwyn because of a interceptor store.
So that's right. What I'm just trying to imagine these various scenarios. If you let's take the train over the cars first. What happens to our train station?
So that would.
And what happens to the train station at Harlem and Berwyn?
So that we would have to figure that out. Again, that's one of the reasons why we would need that's what we try to figure out with this feasibility study. And we don't have the answer to that question. What we're trying to figure out is the answer to that question. But that's one of the reasons why looking at the change in grade for the railroad might be is something that we want to include. And in fact, we're double checking with BNSF to make sure that they'll at least consider that before we move forward with the study.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you? But in the other scenario, though, would be to take the cars underneath the track. And if I try to imagine that, what happens to our businesses on Harlem?
That's something that we need to figure out is what the access changes would be and whether those are acceptable.
It's just hard for me to imagine how there could be a beneficial answer to any of those questions for us.
So again, it's something that we've looked at elsewhere, and we've had projects do one or the other and had a successful result. Probably not in an area as intensely developed as Harlem. But I mean, when you think about going fairly far into the past, the Green Line in Oak Park was at grade, and they raised that. So that would be another a similar sort of environment came up with the solution to raise the railway.
Because I know, I just remember years ago, there was an idea floated about a pedestrian overpass over First Avenue. And the reality of that project became apparent that in order to do that, it would have had to have started, on the far side of the high school because of the grade that was necessary for people, for handicap access to even be able to get up it. So when I try to imagine how far back you would have to start to raise a train, or how far back you'd have to start to lower the cars, it seems to me that would almost, because we are so built out, and I think this would be the same thing true on the Berwyn side as well. I don't see how you don't completely cut off vehicular access to the businesses on both sides of Harlem going through that stretch.
Yeah. Again, raising the train would...
Raising the train would not do that, but taking the cars underneath would.
So that was an issue that was identified with the first one. Again, if again, depending on how many lanes were separated, the part of what was proposed in 1990, whatever, in the 1990s was only taking one, if I remember right. I have to double check this, but one possibility is to leave some lanes at grade, and then have two lanes.
I see.
Either raised or lowered, and that would, So again, this is speculative,
Right.
But those were at least alternatives that were mentioned in the 1990 study. But that's something that, again, with modern engineering standards, we'd have to start all over again, because again, we couldn't build what we proposed back then.
So if the board was to give approval for proceeding with the feasibility study, are we involved with that?
Yes.
Because obviously our concern is somewhat provincial in that we want to protect our businesses and protect our residents, right?
Right.
So do we have a voice as that study is being done?
Yes. So the first part of the study is initiation and trying to determine who the stakeholders are, and that includes the local governments, the transit agencies, the railroads, IDOT, any other jurisdiction agencies that have access. We also have underground utilities that need to be addressed and so forth. So basically, at the beginning, all of the stakeholders are addressed, all of the local governments, and then we move forward with a public involvement plan to make sure that as we move forward with the study, first of all, the local governments and the other stakeholders help determine what the purpose and need are. Help determine what the issues are that we need to address when we identify the existing conditions. We lay out what the situation is first, and then given that situation, define a purpose and need for the project, what the issues are for the community. But we can't do that without
I understand.
without the full involvement of the communities.
So when you say stakeholders, then that would include our businesses that would be affected along Harlem?
Absolutely.
Okay.
President
Sells? Please.
And I share President Sells' concerns, as far as the full grade separation, putting a wall between parts of Riverside that the train is going to go over is not appealing to me. Putting Harlem Avenue lower. But you also mentioned that there's other alternatives, network improvements, and technology that would redirect traffic, and we'd just love to hear more detail about both of those, what I'll call the non-evasive options.
Yeah, so one thing that the city of Chicago is looking at is providing information, particularly for motorists, that can redirect traffic on the fly as crossings are blocked. so that the system detects which direction the train is going, whether there are conflicting trains, whether there are two trains, and then whether how long the blockage is expected to last, and then again provide direction on the web and in signs and so forth for the motorist to address. The one problem with that is that it doesn't address pedestrians. So a motorist can find a detour, but we have a collected video of pedestrians sitting at crossings for 15, 20 minutes and then finally deciding, well, they're going to climb over the train. So that's something that technology can't address, but it can address some of the motorist issues.
Other questions? Ms. Evans?
Well, I certainly think that it's worth looking into the possibility of grade separation. I use that intersection every day, twice a day, and it's terribly congested during rush hour and almost all day over the weekend. It becomes a lot worse with the longer trains. It's not pedestrian friendly at all. I don't know if anyone's spent time walking the sidewalks on either side. It's not comfortable. It's, walking down the street with your kids, or it's just not comfortable. So any kind of pedestrian friendly upgrade we could do would be worth it for the community. The gate issues can be terribly disruptive. So I would welcome, the CMAP's help in looking at possibilities for that area. I do have one question. So you did mention all the stakeholders that would be engaged. Is there a time for residents to be engaged in the process too?
So they would be part of the process as well. Yeah. So we expect public meetings to be part of this.
I have a question.
Please.
You talked about doing these projects in the past, and I'm wondering, we're talking about a lot of qualitative values. I'm wondering if there's evidence from past projects that could be more quantified about how it adds value to the community. For instance, the pass-through rates, if they're, pedestrian safety incidents, things like that we could use, because I think you're talking about getting buy-in from people who love this community, so I would think it'd be nice to have some more tangible things. I don't know if that's possible or not. Like, I think about, I don't know if you would have been involved in, but the Main Street in Downers Grove, the
Belmont?
The Belmont, that's what I meant, yeah. So like that station, I know, at least I think that there was a lot of community support around that station, but I think there's also been a big change of like the traffic patterns in there, and I don't know if that's been positive or negative, but that kind of information.
So this, I will say this, that this project was selected because it has one of the highest rates of delay in the region. So that, and there are a lot. We looked at 150 projects, and we've prioritized among those 150. Well, so we have about 1,600 grade crossings in the region. 150 of those have substantial problems. Of those 150, we think that there might be something we can do at 47 crossings or groups of crossings. And among those, we looked at, we prioritized those based on delay, truck traffic, crashes, transit impacts. We have a lot of buses along the Harlem Avenue. So we've looked at a lot of information to try to, again, figure out what the top priorities are, and this is one of the ones that rose to the top.
Okay, just having that as we go through the process,
Yeah.
I think having some of those
Yeah.
variables available to the public
Mhm.
so that they understand the benefits that this is going to provide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we won't know the benefits, we know what the
Right.
problems are.
Yeah.
But we won't know the
That's
benefits until we figure out. what we're
We'll at
gonna
least
do.
have one of the markers, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
President Sells, if I could just, I'm on the fence, and, you know, I think from what I'm hearing from you, the trigger for this selection is based on vehicle traffic. And sitting here, the only concern I have that justifies this project is pedestrian safety. You know, living in Riverside, we've all waited for trains. We map that into our route. If we have to cross the tracks, we give ourselves an extra 10 minutes. We may be 10 minutes early, maybe 10 minutes late, but that's what living in Riverside means. From what I'm hearing, the typical ways to address this vehicle problem is grade separation. And, you know, I'm not sure that that has a positive impact on the village. So, you know, if you came to us and said, it's a pedestrian issue, we're gonna look at how do we make this train use more usable, how do we make that street crossing and train crossing more protective of pedestrians and kids, you'd have my 100% support. But unless I'm mishearing, you're telling me it's the concern on traffic on Harlem Avenue, and there's, you know, the technology may or may not be helpful, network improvement may or not be helpful, so it seems like you're driving us towards some type of grade separation of some point, which I don't see being beneficial to Riverside.
Okay. So I will say that, again, that prioritization was based on the not only delay, but also safety. We don't have information about pedestrians that we can rank projects, but we know that it's an issue in all but one of the crossings that we're looking at. And that's down in Will County at one of the intermodal centers. But we know that that's an issue, but we're not saying what the problem is. That's what the purpose and need says. If the consensus is that the community wants to address the pedestrians and not the vehicles, then that certainly makes a cheaper project. We would probably, again, collect all the data to determine what the issues were. But at the end of the day, the community decides what the purpose and needs are.
Mr. Powell?
So we are not wed to any particular improvement. So East Avenue and 47th Street, the solution there, a grade separation was looked at. What they ended up approving was traffic flow improvements, so no grade separation. So even though you start off with, you know, kind of looking at the crossing, the solution may not be a separation.
That's helpful, thank you.
Mr. Chisa?
Oh,
Go ahead.
That's okay. No, he's had a couple of lunch. Go ahead.
So, yeah, just a couple of things. So you couldn't, it's a feasibility study, so theoretically, it doesn't cost anything to us. And you can answer more the return on your investment long term. Just two things that would be nice to add into it if you could is some sort of a pedestrian access, because when I think about, like, back when I was a kid, we had an underpass, which didn't smell very good, but it was efficient, right? So we walked underneath the tracks in Riverside, but maybe there's something like that over there.
Okay.
Then the other thing that I think about from a safety perspective, and you know, Chief Buckley could probably talk about this more than I could, but just the ability when there are trains stopped or something has gone wrong in downtown Riverside. Right now, I currently go all the way over to First Avenue to try and get past. And from a safety perspective, it might be, you know, in the study to provide any benefits that might occur for our police and fire departments, getting around the tracks. And again, we can always say no, right? Question is, does it pass the gift test, right?
Mr. Powell?
So if this were strictly an engineering study to determine how to move cars and trains and even pedestrians faster, I would be skeptical as well. I would say, it's probably, if you're just going to separate the grade to move vehicles and trains faster, it's probably not going to be to our benefit. I would agree with Trustee Hannan in that respect. But if I've always looked at that intersection and imagined a grade separation crossing with a train station platform that goes over the top of Harlem Avenue into Riverside, that has mixed-use buildings next to it, a TOD development, a true TOD development, which would be an economic engine for the village as well as provide a nice little neighborhood. Access to the businesses there would be a challenge. Ramping and grading would be a challenge and may make it impossible, but I think it'd be good to look at all that and see if something can happen.
So let me put the question to the board in the language of the letter that was sent to us. CMAP is asking for concurrence to begin the first step, the feasibility study. The study will not require financial participation on the part of the village, nor will it obligate the village to support any particular improvement. The study is to determine what improvement, if any, might work for all of the stakeholders involved. So where do you stand? Yes or no?
I would say yes to go forward with the feasibility.
Yes, as well.
Jason?
Sure.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes. You have our concurrence. We look
Okay.
forward to working with you in the future.
All right.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much for coming this evening. Next up is new business, so if you'll indulge me for just a moment. As part of our holiday stroll tomorrow night, we're putting together a time capsule. It's going to be open 50 years from now, when at least some of us will not be here. And we are not going to have, the village board is not going to be meeting the second meeting of December or the first meeting of January. So we will not be back here until January 16th. So this is our last chance to wish everyone a happy holiday, Merry Christmas, and happy, safe New Year. But on behalf of all of you, I did contribute something to the time capsule that I just wanted to share with you as we head into the holiday season. Dear fellow Riversiders, time separates us. Our present is your past, and as we come together to dedicate this time capsule to you, your present is one that we can only imagine. But across time, we share common values deeply embedded in this sacred place that was home to countless Native Americans long before Europeans arrived. We share a place that gave rise to Chicago, thanks to the singular importance of the Chicago Portage. We share a natural setting that inspired Olmsted to create the nation's first conservation design village, based on his seminal insight that beauty is a civic necessity. We did our best to serve these founding ideals by honoring our history, while also extending Riverside's innovative example into the future. We strove to leave for you a sustainable village that emphasized our obligations as stewards to our forest, river, and landscape. We dedicated ourselves to maintaining a village where our children could thrive in a safe environment that encouraged play, learning, and friendship. We aspired to have a village welcoming to people of diverse backgrounds, perspectives, ideas, and cultures, whether visitors coming to share our unique and vibrant community or those looking for a place to call home. We will never know if we achieved our goals, and can only hope that you will remember kindly what we did here. We wish for you a village as warm, decent, and beautiful as the one we enjoy now. We did our best to leave you a Riverside better than the one we inherited. If we succeeded, even a little, we ask only that you now do the same for those to come. Sincerely, all of us. So with that, anyone else have anything for this evening?
That was nice. Thank you.
I'd ask for a motion, second to adjourn.
Motion to
Mr.
adjourn.
Gallegos.
Second.
Second by Mr. Pollak. Please call the roll.
Trustee Peters.
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos.
Aye.
Trustee Giza.
Aye.
Trustee Hannan.
Aye.
Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Pollak.
Aye.
Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you and good night.